All right, hello everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Today what we're going to do is provide you guys with a very brief summary on the age of Andrew Jackson. So in front of you, you should have a very brief note sheet that was assigned for homework, because tomorrow we'll be coming into class and we'll be spending the entire lesson doing some online research within groups on the age of Andrew Jackson. You'll use this information to really compose a short writing piece on what are your perspectives of Andrew Jackson? Should we be viewing him positively or negatively within American history? So I just want to give you today some brief background on the age of Jackson so you can fill out your notes as we go through the video together. All right, so what is the age of Jackson? Well, a few things you need to know about Andrew Jackson as presidency. Once he comes into the office, associated with his presidency and his leadership is something referred to as the spoils system. So going back to that belief, to the winner goes the spoils. So a victor gains the spoils, and for politics, the victor, when someone wins the presidency, they are going to have the opportunity to provide jobs within the federal government. And Andrew Jackson will do this for his supporters. So it's awarding political jobs to supporters, if you can fill this out within your notes section. So some other things we need to know briefly about the age of Andrew Jackson before we start our research is states' rights. This was a major issue from the founding up until Jackson, really up until the American Civil War, is this debate, who really should have more power, state governments, local governments, or that of the federal government? And there were definitely different views, and it focused on the first and second bank development of the United States. So Jackson was a strong believer in the importance of the federal government and that the federal government was supreme over the states, part of that supremacy clause we talked about. Now, many Americans and American politicians supported the creation of the American Bank and the creation of a second American bank, but Andrew Jackson will veto it, seeing kind of the bank as an institution of the rich and the elite. So did not support it and will veto it. So he strikes it down. And as we see here again, institute of rich does not help the poor. And Jackson saw himself as a kind of a vessel or vehicle of helping the common man within the American system at the time. So also, Jackson's time period, we see more democracy interjecting itself into the American political system. He's elected through the nomination of a convention. So as the first president selected by a convention system, where you get delegates coming throughout the country within a political party to kind of vote before we have a major vote on who will represent that party. And Andrew Jackson was nominated through that process, something we still use today. All right, one major issue we'll talk in detail about within this unit and within your research is the issue of Andrew Jackson in the Cherokee Nation. Here's a very famous illustration I just wanted to show you at the beginning. We'll talk and refer more to this, dealing with the issue of the Trail of Tears. Here you see the majority group represented here are the natives, Cherokees, moving west. You do see an American soldier here as well, kind of escorting these Cherokee as they are forced west. And we'll examine Andrew Jackson's role in this and the influence he may have had in Indian removal. So something to keep in mind. Just wanted to show you this so you're aware of what this visual is. We'll talk more about it in class. All right, so the Indian Removal Act is part of understanding the age of Jackson. Jackson supports legislation to move native tribes in the southeast west of the Mississippi to make room for settlers. So again, we've talked about before that Andrew Jackson gets a lot of his support from kind of the working class, the settler class, the Westerners. So they are looking to access more land in the West. Also, we're starting to see gold be discovered in certain areas of the United States, and they want Native Americans moved off. So Jackson will support this. This will result from a case Worcester versus Georgia, where the federal treaties will override state laws removing native tribes. We'll look at this in more detail as well, but I want you just to have a background of what this case is about and how this eventually leads to the Trail of Tears. Ultimately, the Supreme Court rules in favor of the native tribes, but Andrew Jackson is president. His job is to enforce that ruling, but he chooses not to. So Jackson did not support the Supreme Court. There's a famous phrase comes out of this: John Marshall made his decision, let him enforce it. We really have no historical evidence to say that Andrew Jackson actually said that, but his actions represent that phrase, and that's why it's kind of been passed down through American history. So again, it ultimately leads to the forced westward migration of the Cherokees in the 1830s. Many die along the way of disease, starvation, and again, you'll do more research on this in the coming lesson. So really, just so you know, in your notes, you have over 2,000 miles that were forced to move. 4,000 to 15,000 who were removed will pass away during this process of Indian removal. Some other aspects you need to know from the age of Jackson is the Tariff of Abomination, the Tariff of 1828, dealing with Andrew Jackson down here, and John C. Calhoun from South Carolina will get into a major political conflict. And this was a high price on imports were put on goods that made it almost impossible to buy. This did help U.S. manufacturing, but many southern exporters, specifically of cotton, will be very upset about this because other countries will be less willing to buy their American exports. This leads to the nullification crisis. Some southern states did not want to support the tariff and said they are not going to follow or collect duties on the tariff, and it was null and void. Jackson, as president, says, nope, you must follow the supreme law of the land passed by Congress, and it is your responsibility to enforce this tariff. Some historians believe this could have led to earlier civil war, but Jackson, through his strength of character and as president, was able to avoid this conflict. But it continues this debate over supremacy of states over the federal government, and ultimately promoting the idea that the federal union is more important or stronger than that of state perspectives and legislation. So federal laws, again, are supreme law of the land, but unfortunately this does not really come to an end until the end of the American Civil War. So it's leading us on this path to conflict in the age of Jackson. So one criticism of Jackson, that he uses his power, almost referred to as King Jackson. Here you see a picture of him, which we will get into more detail as we go into our research tomorrow in class.